This is Healing Through Love. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Healing Through Love. My name is Olivia Luna, and I'm just a 32-year-old single woman who has never been in love before. And this podcast is my journey to find a healthy, healing, long-term monogamous relationship. So this week I took some time to kind of reflect a little bit on past relationships. Again, just sort of looking at my pattern in relationships previously. And the resounding emotion that just kept kind of coming up for me was anger. And as I sort of sat with it and thought about my anger, I really thought today I could kind of talk about some ways that I have healed from anger in the past and even today as I process that kind of emotion. I think anger is a pretty common emotion that sort of comes up, in a relationship that is maybe unhealthy, a relationship that has ended in a way that you didn't want to, like all of these things. In my young adulthood, I felt like I lived in anger in just my day-to-day life. I was dealing with a lot of just stress, not knowing, how my life was going to unfold, trying so hard to be successful, achieve the goals that I want, and just feeling like I was just failing all the time. And also romantically, still feeling so alone. Not being able to just find the right partnerships and really just feeling defeated in love. And so anger was just something that I kind of leaned on as like a way to, guard myself, as a way to sort of deflect from feeling inadequate. If I just leaned in anger and just blamed it on other things and other people or whatever, then it's okay for me to not be at the point in my life where I want to be. And really it was a crutch. It was a crutch for a crutch for not doing the work that I know I needed to do. And my life was not happy then. I was very much just content in my anger, and it impacted physically as well. My body, just the tension that I was holding all the time. People who knew me and would see me just walking around in the street would say, oh, I wanted to come up and say hi to you, but you just looked really angry about something, and you looked really annoyed. And usually it's no, I'm fine. I'm not, nothing's going on. But I think I was just just naturally carrying this angry, heavy, frustrated energy. I had the quote unquote resting bitch face, which is a whole nother thing that I could talk about. But I realized no, this is my reality. I live in the world of anger, and I really need to do the work to process it, to understand where it comes from, why I'm experiencing it, and to heal from it. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about anger as it specifically applies to my relationships in the past. And I'll talk about some practices that I've used to try to process and work through my anger. So in thinking about different times when I've experienced anger in a relationship, so first and foremost, obviously, if a relationship ends, you're going to have a lot of anger and resentment towards the person that you were with, right? Your ex. I think in trying to understand, why I'm still so angry at this person, or sometimes even, multiple exes I'm thinking about, and just wanting to put all of the blame, the frustration onto them. There's a feeling of injustice that I think my anger is really trying to point to. So when we go into a relationship and we're trying to, build a connection with someone, we can create this narrative about who they are in our heads that when the relationship ends, we start to pick apart and understand that oh wait, that wasn't who they really are. And that feels in a way like a bit of an injustice, right? It feels like I was lied to, I was played, they weren't being honest, they weren't being true and being real in the relationship, all of these things. And I think sometimes there is truth to that, but also recognizing that the injustice itself, that feeling of injustice itself is is also kind of a disillusionment, um, where, you know, if I'm looking at a relationship as something that is transactional and I feel like I'm owed something, or, I had something stolen from me in a way, that's not necessarily a healthy way to operate. And also, I know at the end of the day, even if I were to like call out my exes on all of these things that I feel a lack of justice for, it's not going to really change much of anything, right? Like, I'm still not going to be with that person. I probably shouldn't be with that person. You know, they might not admit to what they feel because they experience the relationship differently. And obviously, no one wants to think that they did anything wrong in a relationship if it comes to, a mutual kind of end, or any kind of ending. Folks, feelings change. No one wants to have to like apologize for how their feelings might have evolved in a relationship. And I think that understanding the injustice side of it is important in the healing process, in that, like, it's okay to be angry, but know that you're not going to win through anger. You're not going to win by, putting your ex on the hot seat and like drilling them to get the answer that you want. Even if they say the answer that you want, like, it still doesn't like feel any better, right? You're still left with that hurt and that disappointment, that sadness, really, of losing the relationship. And I think sadness is another emotion that sometimes anger is like masking in a way. Right? Like, I'll turn to anger because I don't want to feel sad and upset or depressed about the relationship kind of coming to an end. Or even if I'm in a relationship, feeling like there's so much miscommunication. We're not aligned. He's not providing me with what I need, right? It's easy to feel, again, those inadequacies, that sad disappointment. And so I tend to turn to anger as a way to try to keep from feeling those other emotions. So that's one form of anger that I feel sometimes in relationships. Another is when I see and understand the mistakes of the relationship, and I feel just so angry, really, at myself for making those mistakes. But then also, again, feeling this resentment to my partner for maybe not trying hard enough, right? If we had just had that one conversation around this issue, like, it would be fine, right? I felt like a lot of that. I actually felt that in my last, most recent relationship, where I just felt like we needed one more conversation. It just seemed like it sort of just ended literally overnight. And even though we did sort of have like a closure moment, a week or so after, it still felt like, but there's, there's just like questions that are left unanswered, and still things that I just want to say, one more thing to say. And again, the reality is, like, even if we were to have that conversation, it wouldn't change the fact that the relationship has ended, and dissolved to this point of us not being together. While I think it's important to understand and know what your mistakes were, or I don't even want to call them mistakes, but lessons that you take away from the relationship, it's definitely important to understand what those are. So when you go into your next one, you can kind of have those in the back of your mind, and just for yourself, understanding your patterns, who you are and how you are in a relationship, especially when it comes around big emotions like anger. How do you respond and how do you react? I think it's important to understand what those are. But when it starts to turn into blame, when it starts to turn into this self-shaming for having made these mistakes, then it starts to get toxic and unhealthy, right? Because at the end of the day, like, we're figuring it out as we go, right? A relationship is never going to be the same every single time, and you can't go into a relationship trying to do the same habits that you did in the last one. You have to really take time to get to know this person and who you are and how you are together. And so if you're figuring things out, like, mistakes are going to happen, failure might be inevitable. And it's important to just like learn and get comfortable in that, as opposed to turning to anger and just getting frustrated with yourself for not getting it, not getting to love on the very first try, right? And I think that's what I would often get caught up in, is just feeling like, man, if I had just done this, if I had been a more perfect girlfriend or this or that, or offered them this, then they'd still be with me. But sometimes that's not the case. Feelings just change. They maybe have feelings for somebody else. Lifestyle might just not align for them to be in a relationship right now. All of these things that probably, again, have nothing to do with me and my worth, but more so just the dynamics of the relationship that just didn't work out. So, but that's another, big pain point of anger that I found that I was having, was just these, blaming myself for the mistakes of the relationship. And also blaming my partner for us not being able to fix those things. So that way, we could still try to make it work. Another big one is anger with the perception of other people that are outside of the relationship. So this comes into play when I have a relationship with someone where we have maybe a lot of friends in common, or just people in common together. Again, there's a little bit of that injustice factor where I feel like I was hurt by this individual, I was hurt by this person, and they get to just go out into society and continue to be loved and celebrated by people that also, maybe are in my circle and like want to love and celebrate me. I think we just get so caught up in our perception of who we see this person, or this person who we feel this big emotion with because a relationship has ended, or maybe we're in a relationship and things aren't working out, or maybe there is some abusive, toxic behavior. And it sucks when you have to see everyone else, when you have to experience everyone else not seeing that version of them. And yeah, you want to just like shout it out, like, this is who this person is, and I need the world to know it. And I just get so angry and frustrated that my friends are still liking his stuff, and my friends are still talking to him, and they're still hanging out together. And, the image the narrative that I'm sort of telling myself feels invalidated in that way, right? That injustice factor of just like, everything that I'm experiencing is somehow wrong or incorrect because everyone else around me is experiencing a very different version of this person. And that sucks. That's hard. That's really hard. You can feel alone a lot of the time. I don't necessarily want to badmouth my ex either, right? I don't want to paint this negative picture to my friends, but I also think it's important that my experience is still heard and understood, and respected, right? I think I'm learning that there can be a conversation with friends in common to say, okay, so and so and I are not together anymore. These are the boundaries that I have in terms of, how we talk about, or if we talk about my ex and the relationship. And, you're never going to be able to control what other people do in regards to your ex, but you can control how they kind of speak to you about the relationship or about that person, right? Like, I don't want to hear any updates. I don't want to hear how great he's doing or what he's up to. Like, it's it's done. It's over. I'm moving on. I'm living my own life. Just keep that keep that to yourself. I also feel frustration around how people are perceiving me, right? Like, if I do happen to share some things about the relationship with friends, the commentary, or, oh, well, maybe you were overreacting, or you were this or whatever, right? It's so easy to judge and give advice on a relationship when you're standing outside of it. But when you're in it, it's very different. And I think that means it's important to understand who you're surrounding yourself with, number one. But then also if you have common friends with an ex, with a partner that you're experiencing this anger with, being mindful of like who you're confiding in and the things that you're saying, because that judgment and that like any kind of like feedback sometimes when you're in a state of anger kind of accelerates it, right? It kind of just like, what the like, who are you to tell me, like, don't, oh, and you just get even angrier at, at people who are trying to look out for you and trying to offer you maybe some perspective to the relationship. But I think in the moment, I feel like that anger that I was once experiencing now becomes like shame and embarrassment, that like, oh, they don't see the relationship as I am experiencing it. So I must be the crazy one, right? Like then you start to again feel invalidated, as if like your reality and your truth is not what's really happening. So understanding that anger was really important for me. The last one, and this is like the biggest one, again, anger with myself, anger around having not seen, the red flags, anger with having made the choice to even get involved with this person to begin with, right? Again, a lot of blame, a lot of just like frustration with repeating another pattern, especially if you've been doing the work and you feel like, okay, trying to really make a change here. This is it. This is the one. And then it doesn't work out. You get into this spiral of really getting down on yourself and just saying like, oh, here I go again, like same mistake, same problem, still unworthy of love. And the anger that I feel against myself, I think that was the anger that I have held the longest through my life. That's the one that has really like slowed me down, kept me from, great jobs, kept me from great relationships too. Kept me from a lot of things, like really just enjoying and living my life, because I just felt so frustrated with myself. And a lot of that goes back to my upbringing and my childhood. My mother was a very strict caregiver, and there was a lot of anger expressed in our household. If we didn't meet certain standards in our academics, in really just everything, it was met with anger. It was met with, negative self-talk of like, I'm not raising you good enough, and I must be a bad parent because you're doing this, and right, the blaming, the shaming, the guilt, all of that. And so I do feel a lot of resentment and frustration and anger when my life isn't going the way that I want, when I'm not achieving certain things, when relationships fail. And I blame myself big time, big time. I think that's the thing that really keeps me from being able to heal, is I'm not able to forgive myself. I'm not able to have that kind of compassionate tone with myself. So I realized this one day. I think I just sort of woke up and said, I don't want to feel this anger anymore. I don't want to feel this frustration in my life. And it doesn't start with, moving or changing my environment necessarily. It starts with that inner work. It starts with me saying, I need to heal whatever anger I'm holding on to. And so in my last kind of relationships, some of the things that I've done to kind of heal through anger, first thing, in every breakup I've done, in every breakup I've experienced within the last few years, I have written a letter to my ex. And this is a letter that I've never like sent or shared with them or anything. But these are letters that, everything that I wish I could say, everything that I feel like the last thing that I need to say to them, I put it down on paper and I make it real for myself in that way, by not just saying it in my head or, saying it to myself, but really writing it out, like putting it in words. that feeling was just, it's so cathartic to do, to just like have it out on paper. And sometimes, I'll take the letter and I'll like burn it, right? That always feels really good to just kind of cleanse myself of that anger. But sometimes it still ends up being there. And I catch myself even writing multiple letters or multiple versions of a letter as my feelings start to evolve and change. And so one day, during one particularly hard breakup, I wrote a letter, and my therapist asked me to actually read it to her. And as I did, as I was just like listening back to the words that I had written, I slowly started to feel this like release in the tension. And it was a release from this anger that was holding me hostage, this anger that was controlling me in a lot of ways. I've just felt the grip of, of this anger monster like slowly loosening. And it really like gave me a new kind of perspective on that emotion and what I was sort of feeling in as I was writing it. And I realized the importance of this was that her just making space for me to express this anger fully as it was, no judgment or anything, that gave me so much validation in what I was feeling. Because again, it goes back to, right, the perception of other people, this feeling of like, I'm the only one experiencing this version of my ex and no one else is experiencing it, so I must be crazy. She just listened and just like, nodding along in agreement and everything, and just sort of, again, giving me this accreditation, I guess, for experiencing what I went through in this relationship. And I think that was really important and really helpful in my healing process. And so another thing, sharing our anger and our frustration with a close confidant, right? I don't recommend it be your ex. I definitely recommend that you share with, a friend, your therapist, just anybody that you trust and who can just make space for you to share this anger. No judgment, no advice, even no insight, just really allowing you to speak everything that you want to say, but you feel like you can't, or is wrong, or it's not going to be heard or whatever. Really asking someone to hear you as you are. I think that was like so healing for me. And like I said, as I was sharing it, I felt like, okay, I said it. Everything that I wanted to say to him, I've said it, and I put it out to not just myself, but to another person to like hear it and make it real in this way. And now I'm good. Like now I'm a little more at peace with how things have ended, and um I don't need to continue to hold on to this anger. So that was really helpful for me. Another thing that I do, finding healthy and safe ways to physicalize the anger in some way. I feel like anger is an emotion that definitely needs to get out of the body, because it can be so intense. It can create this physical tension that, for me, it comes in the form of like knots in my back and in my, shoulders and everything. My spine will get tight, like my stomach starts to turn, right? It becomes this exertion in my body that I have to get out because it's energy. It's like an extreme shoot of energy that's like flowing through my body when I get angry. So I have fallen in love with boxing, and that's been a wonderful anger release. Just getting able to like really like hit something. But then also just like, moving heavy objects around, going for a nice long run, like really getting my heart rate up, really getting into my breath again, getting into my body. And I find that like, even if I start a workout from this place of like really extreme anger, as I get into it, because I'm like, because I'm doing work that forces me to focus on my breathing, focus on my movement, it really gets you out of your head, right? And out into your body, and any kind of mental things that were fueling that anger start to subside. And by the end of the workout, it might not be completely gone, but like I find like, okay, my emotions are a little more regulated. I'm breathing. I'm able to kind of think a little bit clearer on this issue. So physicalizing it in some way, screaming into a pillow, um, you know, shaking a pillow, like anything to just get it out of your body in that moment. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend doing it in public or out where you're gonna maybe get in trouble or anything. But once you're in a safe space, giving yourself that ability to just dance it out, even, right? Like it doesn't necessarily need to be something aggressive. It can be just through movement in this very, fully immersed in anger. The last thing that I do to really heal through my anger, and this goes back to something I shared earlier, really having that grace for myself and forgiveness. So, like I shared earlier, how sometimes my anger is a mask for the sadness, the depression, or whatever. Giving myself the space to feel that sadness and feel the sadness first, the hurt first, before allowing anger to be the dominant feeling. That usually comes in just angry crying, right? It comes in looking at myself in the mirror, saying all of the angry things that I want to say to myself and that are in my head and that I am unconsciously kind of saying to myself, getting it out and just watching my anger. That was like the best advice I sort of received in my Buddhist practice, watching yourself in a state of anger so you can understand just, the grotesqueness of it, the intensity of it, the beauty of it too. Being able to see yourself in that state that is probably, maybe even a little ugly, a little grotesque, and accepting it and learning to love that side of you regardless. That is like the fastest way that you can heal. You have to be able to learn to love the ugly parts of yourself, right? Healing through love means accepting those sides of you that are less than desirable. And I realized that my anger, as ugly as it can be, it was a form of protection, right? It was a form of fighting for myself. I don't think that I would be on this journey if I hadn't reached a point of such intense anger from my life that I knew I needed to change something, right? Because I was just at that max level, I knew I needed to like make a shift and start to heal. And that's really what my anger is showing me, that I'm a fighter, that I'm fucking, I'm willing to go hard and go all the way to overcome whatever it is that is keeping me from my happiness. I was so angry that I was unhappy. And I think that's the kind of breaking point that I have to get to in my relationships as well, right? Like I get so angry about my ex, about the relationship, about myself and the decisions and everything. And then I just finally get to a point of like, you know what? I'm angry that I'm so angry about this. I'm angry that I'm choosing to be unhappy and be stuck in my sadness or in this breakup. And I just want to get to the other side of it. I just want to get to fucking happiness already. And that's the shift. That's the turning point. That's when my anger becomes a fuel for healing, for transformation, for growth, for change. When my anger starts to become an advocate and an ally for me, as opposed to this thing that just keeps poisoning me. That's the beauty of anger. I realize that. And that's what I mean when I say, having grace for yourself is accepting and understanding the shadow side and the light side to your anger. And for everybody that might be different, right? Like your anger could be something that is pushing you to achieve a big goal, or pushing you to get out of a relationship that is toxic or harmful to you, pushing you to get out of a job that is just devaluing you and dissatisfying, right? Like, our anger can be the spark for a roaring change in our life. But we have to see that light first. We have to see the light side to it. And so I think like that's kind of been the biggest benefit to this work, is understanding, what sort of advantages my anger can offer me. I feel lighter already. So I'm curious. I would love to know how you have worked to heal through your anger, what sort of practices that you have. But then also I want to know, like, what does anger do for you in your relationships, in dating? What sort of insight can your anger provide for you when you're looking for some kind of growth or change in your relationships, right? So reach out, let me know. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Healing Through Love. As always, if you are loving this podcast, please consider giving a 5-star review. Also, if you are able to give financially, there is an option for you to be a monthly donor. Just hit the support link in the show notes, and you can set any donation amount. Any and every amount helps. Everything goes towards just furthering the growth of this podcast. And if you're listening to this podcast on Spotify, I have some polls and questions at the bottom of each episode that you can submit your answers to. As always, please reach out on social media, tag us, share this episode with friends. You can tag us at solidarity_media. And you can also head to solidaritymediaproductions.com to continue the conversation with me. Thank you so much for joining me on this, quick little chat exploring anger together. And I look forward to continue exploring all of our emotions as we heal through love. Bye, everyone.